From game day to signing day, breaking down every snap and all the news on Alabama's top football recruits. It's time for Crimson and Blue Chips with your host, John Garcia Jr.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to a Tuesday edition of Crimson and Blue Chips. We are your audio authority for all things Alabama football as well as recruiting. I'm your host, John Garcia Jr. We've got a fun show for you today, whether you're listening via iTunes, via Bama Sports Radio, 24/7 Sports. Of course, we're powered by Bama Online. We've got a lot going on today as we kind of segue from SEC Media Days, preseason discussion, back to recruiting, which is kind of what we wanted to do since we dedicated an entire week to SEC Media Days. Again, if you missed it, listen to Nick Saban, listen to us talk about Nick Saban, listen to Kurt McNair, preview the whole thing, all of that for you for free right here on Crimson and Blue Chips. But today, as we said, we're going to shift more towards recruiting. You'll hear from the lone 5-star commitment on the current list for your Alabama Crimson Tide, a number we expect to increase, but right now there's only one 5-star. You'll hear from him today. He's got a lot to talk about, very popular recruit, so we'll get to him. Well, you already know who he is if there's only one 5-star if you're paying attention, but we'll segue to him, and then we'll talk a little bit of the SEC network takeover that's going down for Alabama on Tuesday. We'll talk about some of the events that you will be able to relive with the SEC network, and then producer Kevin and I might throw our 2 cents into some that we would like to see, and spoiler alert, that'll be very football heavy. And of course, after that, we'll wrap with you guys Q&A style right here on CABC. Our next guest here on Crimson and Blue Chips, we talked so much that we really couldn't even figure out if he'd been on the podcast before, but either way, 24/7 Sports Composite 5-star recruit and a long-standing Alabama commitment you guys are all too familiar with, Pierce Quick, now joining the program. Pierce, you're kind of the flag bearer. We talked about it before these quarterbacks jumped on board. Your quarterback, Paul Tyson, and, of course, Talia Tagovailoa. You've been that flag bearer for Alabama, and I think it really started with your commitment way back when, but then you kind of shifted it even more when you sent out that "I'm shutting it all down" kind of tweet. Just kind of take us back to that decision to really tell everyone else, hey, look, I'm really done at this point, and Bama's kind of the school.
Yes, sir. So, I committed on April 22nd of 2017, so I've been committed for a pretty long time, like you said, and, I was really young when I committed. I just finished up my sophomore year. I honestly, didn't do that much with the recruiting process, but I knew the whole time Bama was where I wanted to go. I just wanted to, get out and see some other schools. So earlier this year, I only visited up 2 other schools, but I visited Clemson and Mississippi State, and that was nice. But after that, I started really just sitting down and thinking about it and talking with Coach Key, and I was thinking, there really wasn't that many commits at that time, and I didn't want it to be another slow year like last year. So I thought, if I shut this down and just start visiting other schools and just decided to go all in 100% with Bama, that I could possibly build one of the greatest classes for Bama just because of the in-state talent this year. And so that's just what I decided to do.
Yeah, we actually looked at that. Somebody, we do questions at the end of each show, and somebody asked about the greatest class of all time on 24/7 based on the point system, and it was, I think, Florida in 2010. They had something like 18 or 19 4-stars, and the rest were 3 stars, or 4 stars or better, and the rest were 3 stars. And this Bama class, of course, sitting at 20 prospects, all but 1 4 stars or better. So if the path continues, the chances of getting to the top are there for this class, and obviously you're a big part of that. But what does that mean? I guess, what does that mean with the progress of your mission? We know it's not over, and we'll get to that here in a second, but what does that mean to kind of be a part of the foundation? Because if you look back at this class, no matter how it shakes out, of course you'll look to the quarterbacks because that's standard, but, Pierce Quick will be one of the first guys mentioned, if not the first.
I'm going to be honest, I didn't even realize that, they built the Florida thing and all this stuff. So hearing that gets me excited right now. But like you said, we're far from done. So not only do I want to beat the best class, I want to destroy it to make sure nobody else can beat it, or maybe another Bama class in the future will beat it.
Yeah, that's something that obviously you, Nick Saban, Brent Key, and the rest of the squad is working towards. One of the big events, really the biggest event of the offseason, is usually a big part of how it shakes out. You know, I always like to tell people, take a snapshot of something, right? Whether it's a commitment list, whether it's a group of kids visiting a certain weekend or anything like that, and we'll probably talk about that later. But the opening finals is really the best snapshot we can provide in terms of best on best, good on good, talent on talent. Even though it's not always, equal because of the high school rules that are ridiculous that we will continue to bash until they change them. But just in terms of being there, it is 5-star on 5-star, 4-star on 4-star. And you, of course, were invited to the opening finals. You competed over several days of action, both alongside fellow Alabama commitments and, of course, against and alongside plenty of targets. But before we get into your recruiting pitches, just in general, Pierce, what was the opening like for you? I know it's something you really worked towards, and I wanted to represent yourself well with.
So the opening was honestly one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. Like, that was just an awesome football camp. It was one of the first football camps where, like, I learned stuff. Like, I went in and I left knowing stuff I didn't know before. At some of these football camps, and part of it's because of time. They just don't have time to teach all that. But at the opening, like, sitting down in meeting rooms and watching your film and learning from these guys, like, that was awesome. And then, a bunch of people don't know this, but Greg Little, like, that's actually a guy that I've been watching ever since I was younger. When he was in high school, I watched his opening highlights and stuff like that. And to have him out there coaching me, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so again, for those who don't know, multi-days, I think it was 3 days this year in Dallas, Texas, at the Star, at the Cowboys HQ, if you will. What was that part of it like? Because this is the first time the opening's been out there. We usually go out to Oregon every summer, but this year we were very hot in Texas, except for when we were indoors, thankfully. What was that like, just being, I guess, on the same field as the Cowboys as they gear up for their games?
No, that was cool. That was super cool. That's the nicest facilities I've ever seen. That was just unreal. Like, seeing all that stuff around there was really cool, and getting to sit in the same meeting room that some of the, greatest players that have ever played have sat in, and some of the greatest offensive linemen, that was awesome. And practicing on the same field they practice on, that was super cool. So, it just, like, put into perspective that, someday I'd hope to be practicing on a field like that.
That makes sense. Give us a snapshot, Pierce, because we see the competition, and we take video of you guys going one-on-one, and that's kind of when I'm most excited, things like that. But what else goes into the opening? Because we don't see the positional meetings. We don't see a big portion of it, really. What else goes into that event, just from the player's perspective?
Honestly, like, the one-on-ones and stuff were nice, but like you said about the pads rule, it was a little bit different for me because I only got to face two guys. So, but the best part about the opening, in my opinion, was the meetings and stuff like that. And honestly, the friendships that I built. I met a lot of guys, and even guys that aren't Bama recruits. You know what I mean? Like, even guys that, aren't coming to Bama. It was just cool to get to hang out with some of the top offensive and defensive linemen in the nation.
Well, where I got a segue right there, talking about meeting other guys, spending time with other guys. One guy who was there also representing the state of Alabama is one that you've spent a lot of time with, and he's the name that everybody still wants to know about in the state when it comes to Alabama. Clay Webb, top center in the country, fellow 5-star like yourself. I'm always asked, when is he committing? Does Bama have the lead? And I typically say he says December, and I think Bama leads, but there's still some dust to be settled. What say you in the Clay Webb recruitment?
So me and Clay are pretty tight. We roomed together at the opening. We roomed together at the Pro Football Hall of Fame camp. Like, I would consider him, probably one of my best friends in the recruiting cycle for sure, and all that stuff. And even outside of the recruiting, one of my really good friends. Like, we hang out all the time, and especially with football and stuff like that. And in my opinion, I can't speak for Clay, but in my opinion, I would say that Bama is the school to beat, and I hope that's how it is. And I hope that in December he ends up signing with Bama, just because of the friendship we already have, and to be able to play with him and probably room with him at Bama would be really nice.
how does your pitch kind of evolve or even change with Clay? Because I'm sure early on, because you two were both high profile early in your high school career, I'm sure early on it was like, hey man, let's play together, roll tide, whatever. But how has it changed and kind of evolved as you both have matured and gotten to experience all these great things together, all these showcase events, camps, and a bevy of unofficial visits, game visits, all of that?
It has changed. Listen, that's a good point because like at the beginning, me and Clay, we knew each other, but we weren't really like, tight or anything like that. So it was more like you said, just like a roll tide, let's play together, it'd be cool, blah, blah, blah. But now it's more like, we're really good friends. We already have good chemistry. Like why don't we play together? Like us playing next to each other, we would dominate just because we already got the chemistry. And, it would be fun to be able to play next to you and say that, we knew each other a couple years before Bama and stuff like that. And I talk about recruiting with them, always mess with them, telling them, when you're going to commit and stuff like that. But now, we just talk more about stuff outside of football, just life and stuff like that, and ask him how he likes other schools. And, I will ask him, what is holding him back from committing and stuff like that.
Is he overwhelmed? I don't want to get too much into you speaking for him, but is it just where he's focusing on his team right now because, the 2018 season, y'all's senior year of high school is ramping up, or is it just, hey, he's going to be 100% thorough with all the time that he needs?
I think it's, 100% thorough and focusing on his season just because Clay, he loves all those guys he plays with and all that stuff. And he's always talking about how he wants it to be a big ceremony with all his teammates just because, he's worked with them for so long and stuff like that. So I think that's, that's part of it too. It's just doing it with all his guys and making sure he's 100%.
Now, you talked about working together with Clay and possibly playing next to him. I know that means you both are versatile. Him, center guard, you, guard tackle, maybe center one day, who knows. How much of that has factored into your own development? Because, like we said, you're the flag bearer, you're kind of the lead recruiter here. So that means when you're recruiting other O linemen, you're saying, hey, this guy can do this, I can do this, maybe you can come in and do this for us. So how much I guess ownership have you taken with the versatility and the flexibility, which is obviously a compliment to you?
Yes, sir. So, like a year ago, honestly, I thought like I was one of those hard-headed guys, and I was like, I'm probably just a tackle, like all I play is tackle. And then these past couple months, I've just been kind of moving around and playing everywhere. And Coach Key's been telling me he thinks I can end up being a really good center and guard and, still do tackle. So every time at Bama camp, I've played center, guard, tackle. I've done every single position, and I'm really starting to like it. Honestly, I'm liking center a lot more than what I thought I would. So it's been nice, playing everywhere and seeing what I like more and stuff like that.
Are we going to get any of that this fall, or are you bound to
Nah,
stay on
for
the
my
edge?
yeah, for my high school team, I'll probably stay on the edge all fall.
Gotcha. Had to ask. One more
Yes, sir.
one more point from the opening. Really, two more. Um, Moving around, obviously, you got to do it some at the opening, but like you said, the rules in Alabama, just like Ohio, just like Louisiana, limit the shoulder pad helmet combination in July. But that means you were paired up with some pretty good players. You got to block a ton of Ismail Sopsher, Mohamed Diabate, and Zach Harrison, who at the time was the number one player in the country on 24/7 Sports. Whether it's guys you blocked like them or other guys you saw, whether it's Kayvon Thibodeau, Nolan Smith, Darnell Wright, Evan Neal, I mean, the star of stars were all there. Who impressed you? Who impressed a composite five-star like yourself at an event like that where you got to see it up close or possibly experience it head on?
I would say the guy that impressed me more than anybody, just like a guy that surprised me that I hadn't seen play in a while and, all that. Like I'd never seen him in person, but I'd seen his highlights and stuff like that would be Evan Neal. Like I hadn't seen him go in a while, and then he went out there and honestly, I mean, he dominated at the opening. In my opinion, he was probably the best lineman there at the opening overall. At that camp, I feel like he had the best performance. He was just dominating guys.
Yeah, he seems to have lost some weight and really improved. Is it that simple? When you cut weight, you're just that more mobile, or was it something else?
I think it was, I think it had to do with weight and just training. It looked like like I said, I've never seen him at a camp before, but I'd watched his highlights and stuff like that. He was just moving so well. Like his set and stuff looked just so much better than what it had looked before on film and stuff like that. And so, part of that has to do with weight, but probably a lot of training too.
Yeah, part of the reason why his profile has risen. He's risen in the rankings, all of those things trending up definitely. And he's a guy Bama is kind of in on. He was committed
Yes,
even
sir.
before you at one point, believe it or not.
Yeah, I didn't even know that, honestly.
Yeah, for a very short time. He was, I think, a freshman, so it was kind of like, who's this kid? Wow, he's huge. Oh, he's committed. Oh, he's decommitted. It was that quick. But
Yes, sir.
but what's your pitch to a guy like that, and or guys at the opening? Who were you making it a point to at least say something to, at least get some FaceTime with before, you left that event to say, hey, I know all these schools want you, but, here's example XYZ of why you should consider Bama. Here's my number, whatever. Who did you make it a point to kind of connect with?
So I'd say my main two guys, just because I was around them the most, were Clay Webb and Darnell Wright. Just because they're linemen, and I'd say those were my main two to be around. But a guy that I don't play the same position as, and I just really felt like I needed to talk to is N'Kobe Dean. That was just a guy that I felt like I really needed to make a point to talk to and hang out with him a lot this weekend as much as I could, because the positions were separated a lot. And I feel like I really needed to just keep on pounding into him that, Alabama's the school where he needs to go.
Was there like a collective in terms of there was a lot of Bama commits there, right? You, Talia, Kevin Harris, Christian Williams, the list goes on and on. Was there kind of like a team meeting with you guys, like, hey, let's make sure we talk to this guy or that guy, or is that really just more of a Pierce Quick deal?
No. So we had all the Bama commits actually got put on one team. We were, how they broke it up into teams and stuff like that. So all 6 of us got put on the same team. So we had talked about it before, and each of us were telling each other guys we need to talk to and stuff like that. So that was really cool in my opinion, because that was like one of the first times we all came together, and we were just like, even in our group chat and stuff like that, we were texting, we need to start talking to this guy. And I think all the commits are starting to realize like what we're having right now. And so like every single day I'll look I'll look in the group chat and I'll just be like, hey, talk to this guy. Hey, talk to this guy. Hey, y'all need to keep him this guy. Like, I think that's really cool to see we're all coming together and trying to help each other recruit other people.
I've heard a lot of stories about this group chat. I was talking to Christian Williams, Talia Tagovailoa, even King Wakuta earlier this summer, and I was kind of asking for a guy. I was trying to get the scoop on who was kind of the funny guy, who was the low key recruiter, and I heard some things that I didn't expect to hear. Rashad Cheney was a funny guy. Talia, a couple commits said was the funniest. But who's, in your opinion, who's that sleeper recruiter? We know you and the quarterbacks are recruiting. I think that's kind of out there, standard, expected at this point. Who's kind of the sleeper recruiter or two among those 20 Bama commits that you think is going to potentially factor into landing some more big fish?
I would say King. King is really like the main guy. He is like a sleeper recruiter that people don't really realize recruits. And honestly, Brandon Turnage too.
Interesting.
King and Brandon would say too, because they'll privately, text me sometimes about some guys to recruit and stuff like that. So I'd say those 2 guys are really, and then the funny guy I would have to say Rashad Cheney or Kevin Harris. Those 2 guys are funny right there.
The Georgia boys.
Yes, sir. They're funny guys right there.
Okay, so multiple people have told me Cheney now, so that's interesting. We'll have to get him on at some point.
Yeah, you'll definitely have to get. He's a funny guy.
Yeah, we're going to explore that at some point for sure. So all of the recruiting at the opening kind of just rolled into the dead period, which is finally ending here in the next day or so, and that means there's a little bit of time to get on college campuses, to take more visits, things like that. So everybody's lining up their kind of end of summer final recruiting event. So Florida's got Friday Night Lights. Florida State's got Saturday Night Lights, which Willie Taggart brought from Oregon. So Oregon's still doing Saturday Night Lights. I think Ohio State's got an event. Clemson, Tennessee. Alabama is doing another cookout. Champions Cookout 2.0 or 2, however you want to call it. We've never seen this before because we've never had this kind of dead period in the middle of the summer. So this is
Yes,
Bama
sir.
really kind of opening it up and kind of playing the game a little bit. And we know there's some big time visitors slated to attend. You're slated to attend. Fellow five stars Trey Sanders, Darnell Wright, who you mentioned earlier. What's different, I guess, or expected to be different from this cookout compared to the one at the end of June, which had a ridiculous visitor list?
I love this. I think this one will be better because you know as well as I do, a lot of guys like to make their decision right before their senior season. You know what I mean? A lot of guys like to knock it out and go and get it out of the way before their senior season. And part of the reason I feel like, like Bama might have not gotten as many commits right before is because a bunch of guys want to do it on campus. And I feel like this gives a ton of guys to get it on campus right last time, right before their senior season, and just go ahead and knock it out. And this is the last time that they'll ever get to visit a school that's other than their official if they take it after the season, but not during football season. This is really like their last visit, not to go to a game. You get what I'm saying?
So are you hinting at a possible commitment this weekend, or are you saying in general this is a big deal?
There's a possibility.
Okay, okay.
Possibility for sure.
I hear some vagueness in your voice. All right. So yeah, we'll see how that list materializes. Of course, BamaOnline.com has all of your coverage, the entire list. A lot of commits expected back too. Is that something that the staff kind of harps on with you guys returning for these types of events? Because obviously they want you on campus because they want you to be solid and all that stuff. But obviously they know Pierce Quick is going to be recruiting, right?
Oh heck yeah! Like they tell you, they're like, hey, and honestly, they're still recruiting you. You know what I mean? Like they're still going to recruit me and other guys and all that stuff when we go down there. But our main thing for this stuff is to help be more that be a part of the staff at that point. Go around and start talking to other guys because as a recruit, the main thing you want to hear, I feel like, is why did this other guy commit? Like what made him commit and stuff like that. So I feel like walking around and telling them, what made me do it. Now, like I said before, my committed is going to be different than a lot of other guys because I'm an in-state kid. I grew up a fan, but other out-of-state guys, I feel like that's huge for them to walk up to a guy who lives in Maryland to go walk up to a guy who lives in California because they're both pretty far and tell them their story as to what made them commit to Bama.
Yeah, that's obviously an important element here. What actually goes on at these events, Pierce? Because look, sometimes we got a lot of kids to talk to, right? We've got a lot of stories to write, so we don't get to spend a ton of time on the phone and digging with each individual case. But what really goes on here? It can't just be, hey, I'm Coach Saban. Here's some barbecue. Have a good day kind of deal. What else goes on at these events, these non-football, non-camp recruiting events that have become so popular?
So the cookout's my favorite thing, honestly. So like, would they set up the indoor facility? They put up cornhole. There's all kinds of games, like tailgating games basically, and they're just laid out everywhere. They got tables out everywhere, couches in the indoor, just all kinds of fun stuff, and it's just so chill. You got coaches going around playing hacky sack and cornhole and other games with a bunch of with a bunch of recruits. You got current players in there walking around talking to guys, and it's just chill. It's football isn't even really the main talk in there. It's just talking, just having a good time. And I don't really tour it anymore because I've seen all of it. Guys that hadn't seen it before, they'll tour and stuff like that. Then after that, they'll take you to the stadium. You go inside, your jersey's waiting on you, full uniform. You put that on. You take pictures. You get to hold up all the national championship trophies they got and all that stuff. And then you go back. And last time we ended up going to their new eating facility and just having ice cream and funnel cakes.
Says the offensive lineman, who I'm sure really, really enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite part right
there. More nervous for Pierce Quick, shaking Nick Saban's hand for the first time as a legitimate prospect, or holding one of those national championship trophies for the first time?
Nervous-wise, I'd have to say shaking Coach Saban's hand. I'll never forget the first time I did that. That was nerve-wracking. Actually, the first time I did it, I wasn't even really being recruited. Like, I was a recruit, but it was during my sophomore season. The first game I ever visited for was the Chattanooga game. And, I mean, he didn't even really know who I was. He was just making his rounds and then walking around to every table. shaking every person's hand. I just remember I was like, oh my gosh, here he comes.
How has that changed with him? Obviously, you're one of his top commitments, and it's a long time coming. It's happened so long ago. So I mean, how I guess what I'm saying is, how casual can the relationship with Nick Saban be? Is it always
It's
kind
gotten
of tiptoey a little bit, or can it become casual even as a recruit?
I'm not gonna lie, it's still, like I still get, every time I go in there, I still get a little nervous, but it's definitely a lot more casual than what it used to be. Like now, like I walk in there, he knows us all by heart and stuff like that, and talking to my family, and we're not even really talking about football. Then at the end, hearing him ask me, all right, so what guys are you recruiting and stuff like that, like that's really cool.
So he's asking you the same questions we're asking you, basically.
Yes, sir.
There you have it. There you have it. It's not an exact science per Pierce Quick. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I could do this all day, honestly. You're great. You've always been great with us, and we appreciate it. It's a shame you haven't been on the show more, but that's kind of my fault. So I do appreciate this time. We're surely looking forward to seeing how gaudy that list gets for this weekend. And like you said, possibly a commitment. So, Bama fans and listeners out there will surely be paying close attention this coming weekend for Champions Cookout 2.0. Pierce Quick, 5-star O lineman, longtime Bama commitment, and flag bearer. Sir, we appreciate you joining Crimson and Blue Chips, and I'm sure I'll be bugging you again here soon.
Heck yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Want to thank Pierce Quick for joining us here at CABC. Like we said in the interview, talked to him for 2 years, and I have no idea if he's been on the podcast. That's how organized we are right here at CABC. But either way, you see why Pierce is kind of a guy who just makes our jobs easier, whether it's Hank South, me, other guys on the beat. Every year there's a kid or two on the commitment list who just kind of gives us some alley-oops, lays it in for us, and he's one of those guys. So always appreciative of their time. And hey, he's a guy we could bring on every single week because of the changes that go on in recruiting. And look, Pierce is a guy who keeps up with that. Most kids are worried about the rankings and, hey, why did I fall 3 spots? He dropped like 8 spots after the opening, but didn't give us any crap about it. Didn't really care. He just more is worried about where everybody else is and the crystal balls, who's trending for Bama, stuff like that. So kids like that really do help us out. They minimize distraction, keep us on task, and like I said, when he keeps up with things, it just makes it easier for everybody. And like Pierce said, hey, Nick Saban's even curious, like we are. Hey, who are you recruiting today, Pierce? So you got that from the opening, and you got what his kind of plans are for the Champions Cookout 2.0. So always appreciate his time. We will segue to Q&A, but first I want to talk about the SEC Network. They've got an Alabama-themed day today, Tuesday, July 24th, as I pull out my phone here. The Alabama Takeover is today, beginning, really it was started Monday night at 11 p.m. with men's hoops against Oklahoma. Sorry, Trae Young. And then really a litany of sports, whether it's softball, baseball, gymnastics, soccer. Hey, Alabama soccer, who knew? Really a balanced look at Alabama athletics in this takeover. But as we bring producer Kev in, we're going to flip it a little bit in the theme of recruiting and make it football only, because why wouldn't we? No disrespect to the champion Alabama women's softball and gymnastics, and I think even golf teams of the year past. This is a football show, so we're going to pretend it's the SEC Network Alabama football takeover. So producer Kev, there's a lot of ways you can go about this in terms of how you pick a 24-hour block of scheduling, and it's actually just under 24 hours technically, but let's just say 24 hours hypothetically, and let's obviously say that we have television access and full amazing broadcasts of games from yesteryear, maybe black and white, maybe beyond that. So we can span the whole spectrum. So how do we pick the greatest games, or really moments, right? Is it moments or games? What's more important to you? If you're looking for a team-heavy thing, it's more of the moments, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of these games, even all the big games, have that signature moment.
Right.
So,
I think so.
Yeah, I think it really is the moments.
Yeah. Obviously, they'll play the full games, but we really want to highlight the moments and have like some theoretical all access behind some of these moments. So where do you start? I mean, do you go chronologically? Where do you start with it? I'll let you. I'll let you take the reins here. Let me be the guest. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, we'll start chronologically. In the one lone football game that they are going to show on the SEC Network takeover is the 1981 Iron Bowl, which is Bear Bryant's 315th win in his last Iron Bowl. So
Pretty important.
they're going to show that one. I started with the 1926 Rose Bowl. It was the first natty and the first time any team from the East had been invited out to the West Coast. They played Washington and they won. It's known as the game that changed the South.
Think they flew or drove a bus?
Ooh, 26.
College too. They
Well,
flew-
wasn't it? But wasn't it bigger than pro football back then? Like
Yeah, that's true.
you were really like the celebrity if you played college ball.
That's true.
Um,
Either way, that's
Either way, that's a long trip back
yeah,
then.
Yeah, it's a long trip now. Shoot.
So we went from. I thought the first national championship should be on there. Then I went with the 1979 Sugar Bowl in the goal line stand against Penn State.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Classic.
Yep.
Field goal there.
Yep. The 1985 Iron Bowl. The kick.
The kick. Why we always we always give these short nicknames?
They always short and sweet. Like always.
Punt, Bama punt. Kick six.
The kicks. Let's not talk about that.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Like, why do we give it these long, flowy names? Like, nope, short and sweet.
Short and sweet.
Short
Let's
point.
see. After the 85 Iron Bowl, went with the 86 Notre Dame game, also dubbed the Sack.
See?
The
sack.
And then after that, I got more.
Was Rudy on that team?
That's a good question.
Probably didn't play.
Probably not.
Sorry.
Georgia Tech was his only game.
He was offsides.
Don't tell Notre Dame fans that. Then we went more recent, the 1993 Sugar Bowl where they beat the Canes.
The strip.
The strip.
George Teague, son.
Another short one. And then I started getting more current. I had a couple from 2009, which was Saban's first natty.
Yeah.
So another one, called it Rock Block. Terrence Cody block against Tennessee.
Lane Kiffin, baby.
And Kiffin. The 2009 SEC Championship, Tebow cries. I think everybody became a Bama fan just a little bit for that moment.
How
when they saw
funny
Tebow
is that?
cry.
How funny is that? Because everybody hates Bama, right? Like
Everybody does now, but for that slim moment, everybody was a Bama fan because they got to see Tim Tebow cry.
Yeah, I think people forget that it was a really short run. It was 2.5 years where Florida was that annoying team.
Oh, terrible.
That was what people pretty much think of Bama now. People were scared like, uh-oh, this is about to be a long run. This is before Tebow cries, before Urban's real or unreal health incident. This was really becoming kind of team of the double O's or whatever we want to call that decade. Chris Leak, Tim Tebow, Percy Harvin, the Pouncey twins, Cam Newton. Like, it should have went from Tebow to Cam. Like, they could have been. If it wasn't for Bama, it really could have been this snowball of boring orange, and jail orange, boring blue. Said that wrong. That really would have taken over college football. And who knows, maybe still taking over college football. Maybe Urban Meyer's in his 15th year at Florida, and they've won 10 natties or something crazy. We don't know.
Sounds awful.
We don't know what it could have looked like. But comes Bama, redemption song in the SEC championship game after losing to Florida the year prior. Beat Tebow his senior year. He cries, and then Bama goes on to obviously win championship number 1 under Nick Saban, where, again, I think people were rooting for Bama. Bama was the underdog. Remember, it was Texas. It was Colt McCoy. It was they had just won it a few years prior with Vince Young and that crazy run. Bama was the underdog, kind of the feel-good story for, I guess, everyone outside the SEC maybe. And then so it's funny to look at that because now it's like everybody's like, hell no, I'm done with Bama. I'm done with Nick Saban. Go UCF, national champs. Like it's so focused on beating Bama and upsetting Bama. It's just funny how a few years ago people were legit rooting for Bama. If you did not have a dog in the fight, you were rooting for Bama to beat Tebow. And now nobody outside of Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Bessemer, Huntsville, Mobile gives a rip about Bama winning. Everyone wants them to lose, and it's boring and whatever people say. Here we are. It's a beautiful thing. Football's amazing, and who would have thought?
So then the next one is the 2009 Natty with Marcel Darius and the touchdown return. If you ask anybody in Big 12 country, it's Colt McCoy got hurt. Well, okay, it doesn't matter.
So what do we hold on? We don't have a nickname for that? The hit?
I just
shoulder. How about the shoulder?
I can't remember what they called it. Or like the Darius Rumble or something like that.
Okay, just give Darius some love. I get it.
Yeah, give him some love.
It all goes together. He deserves it. He made the play both times and
scored the touchdown.
Yeah, he was nimble.
Then we got 2011 had a couple. 2011 had Trent Richardson, the juke, against Ole Miss. And then 2011 also had the rematch in the national championship between them and LSU.
Okay, is that one called the shutout?
I just had the rematch.
Or the rematch. It's the game that ended the BCS, pretty much, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, we hate rematches. Well, now we're just getting 2 teams into the playoff in the SEC. So happy birthday. Happy birthday, Big Ten.
They complained about it, so they got what they wanted.
Yeah.
But now they get 2 SEC teams playing for the national championship again last year. Good job. So then we went 2012, and I called it the fake girlfriend. They they played Notre Dame in the Natty. Everybody thought it was going to be a good game.
Not me.
And it was not.
That was pre-Crimson and Blue Chips, but we would have not predicted a good game.
No, I mean...
I watched that game at a bar because I knew I didn't have to watch all 4 quarters.
Me and you were actually together when the whole fake girlfriend thing broke, and we were just looking at each other like, this can't be real. Like,
press conference and everything.
Yeah.
It was like, what?
I just remember it. The fake girlfriend, everybody thought it was going to be a good game. Alabama absolutely blew them out. Just remember the spin move after spin move after spin move.
Eddie Lacy. Yep.
And then we went... there's so much in between. The 2016 national championship, didn't really have a name for that one. 2017.
That should be the special teams.
Yeah.
Outside kick, Kenyon Drake kick return.
Field goal. Yeah. And then 2017, Mississippi State Hurts to Smith for the game winner.
Oh, Jalen Hurts can throw?
Apparently.
Oh, okay.
People forget about
that was a game winner. What, 30 seconds left, maybe less?
Yeah. In a previously pretty quiet offensive game for the entire Alabama team.
Yeah, that was last November. So again, not that long ago.
And then, of course, 2018 national championship, 2nd and 26, whatever we're calling it these days. The shot heard around the world, the walk off, whatever. Is what we're gonna end on.
I agree with that. So we matched up with one thing that the actual SEC network Alabama takeover is doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're doing the 1981 Iron Bowl, which was Bears' last Iron Bowl.
Okay, so 2. There we go. Has anyone? I'm sure I've brought it up, but people forget Devontae Smith was a Georgia commit. So that was, I mean, amazing. There's so many amazing elements of that game that just continue to play out as we go on. It's almost like there's so many that we forget, the little ones like that, all the freshmen on the field and, looking off like a redshirt senior safety to get him off his spot to throw to the former Georgia commit in Atlanta. Wasn't it in Atlanta?
Yeah, in Atlanta.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, it's like there'll be a movie about that.
It was built for Georgia to win.
For sure. I don't know who's going to play Tua, but there'll be a movie about it.
He'll play himself.
Yeah, probably.
I can see that.
Probably. Okay, so that wasn't a promo. The SEC Network is doing an Alabama takeover today, all day. So if you need some Roll Tide fix, you can get it on check your local provider. Is that what they say? Check your local channel subscriptions. Yeah. Anywho, let's jump to why you clicked the show beyond seeing that Pierce Quick was on it. Q&A. Thank you to everyone who has participated. And I'm actually going to let Kevin start this because for the first time, he had questions specifically addressed to him. That is the beauty of our expanding family here at CABC. It ain't just me. Talk to anybody you want to talk to, and we'll try to get the answer for you. So, Kevin, let me get to the question coming in from Luke Ferguson, good friend of the show. He tweets the show at CABC Pod. Kevin, what are some of the challenges this year's O-line will face while preparing for a righty and a lefty quarterback at the same time? Pretty darn amazing question that I had not thought about. So, Kevin, the floor is yours.
It is a good question, and it's one of those things that you don't really see that often. You got a right-handed and a left-handed quarterback in a quarterback battle. I think that's when Alabama's going to fall upon one of the veterans on the O-line, Jonah Williams. He started out as the right tackle. He moved the left tackle. And so I feel like whoever wins the job, if Jalen wins the job, you're going to need your best offensive lineman at left tackle. So that's where they'll put Jonah. If Tua wins the job, they'll probably move him back to left. So I feel like he's going to be the swing guy that moves whichever the quarterback wins the job.
Yeah, I think that's definitely not something people have talked a lot about yet, but yeah, I mean that you have to take that into consideration. If your best guy is going to be a blindside protector, it could be Jonah Williams no matter what, which I think is a blessing for this team. But we know Alex Leatherwood, Matt Womack, Jedrick Wills. There's a bevy of options at tackle either way. But having Jonah there is kind of a big deal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So good question there, Luke. Luke actually had one for me as well. Hey, Luke, good to see you. What's the latest on Christian Harris and Devontae Lee? Been hearing a lot about Lee playing safety at the next level. That's a popular opinion. He's a big physical kid out of Louisiana, but all of the recent buzz has been with the in-state school, the LSU Tigers. So whether or not he's a wide receiver or a safety at this point, it looks like the Bama ship might have sailed, and the thought is that Devontae could be closing in on a decision. So Bama got one really good Devontae out of Louisiana 2 years ago, but it looks like this one may stay in state, but still certainly not a done deal. As for Christian Harris, Luke, same thing. There's a little bit more LSU buzz, but the difference here is there's a third school involved, Texas A&M. Our sources there in College Station still feel pretty good about A&M's chances. LSU feels good about their chances. Bama feels good about their chances. So everybody feels good about Christian Harris at this point. That tells me that his recruitment might go a little bit longer than we expected. Some of us thought he could be done by now. And if I was being honest, I would have been included in that. I would have thought he would have been off the board to Bama at this point. But the longer it goes on, as three schools feel good about it, I think you could start to see some doubt, which usually elongates the process. Hello, Clay Webb. So that's something to keep an eye on with Christian Harris. But again, look, spots are pretty limited here. So depending on Nakobe Dean, you never know. Maybe there's only one more inside linebacker spot available should Alabama hold on to Shane Lee, the commitment out of the D.C. area. So something to keep in mind there with Kevin Harris as well. More Twitter questions coming in. Carl Lenzner, busy on the Twitter. Good afternoon, John. 3 months from today, Alabama goes to Knoxville to play Tennessee. The Tide go for their 12th consecutive win over the Volunteers. If you had to choose between, I'll get right into the question. If you have to choose in between Tyreek Stevenson and Jeffrey Carter, who would you take? Who would Alabama take? This is an easy question for me, Carl, because I'm not that familiar with Jeffrey Carter. I know he's from Texas. I know he's a blue chip. I know Bama likes him. But I know Bama loves Tyreek Stevenson, and I know I love Tyreek Stevenson, one of my favorite DBs in this class. So I will speak for Bama and for John Garcia and say Tyreek Stevenson is the guy I would pick. But the interesting thing here, the more likely guy is Jeff Carter. Because, again, we talk about the likelihood of a kid jumping on board relates to the amount of suitors truly in the mix. With Tyreek Stevenson, one-time Florida commitment. He's from South Florida. Miami feels good there. Everyone else is trying to get involved, Georgia, etc. It could go a number of ways. He doesn't seem close to making a decision. Jeffrey Carter, on the other hand, smaller amount of schools involved, really kind of a Bama-Texas situation, if my memory serves correctly, and he is looking to make a decision sooner rather than later. At this point, I believe he's on track to be at the Cookout this coming weekend. So should Bama press, perhaps Carter is a little closer, or that much more closer to jumping on board. But a good question there, Carl, as cornerback is certainly a position that shouldn't be forgotten about, even though we're going to talk so much about safeties in this class. Josh chiming in, insider_Alabama. Do you think Alabama will ask Antonio Alfano to play more defensive end, defensive tackle this year? They can ask. I would. But high school coach, you're trying to win ball games. And if that, for that week, if that means Alfano as a stand-up guy, as a tight end, as a guy you just move depending on personnel and what have you, you're going to probably continue to do that. But he inevitably will play more on the line just because he's getting bigger. And if they play better competition, obviously, he's going to be closer to the line of scrimmage. But if he is as athletic as we think he is, and he's played all over the line, all over the front seven already in high school, I would bet he continues to do more of the same. But yeah, I mean, Alabama would love Pierce Quick to play center for Hewitt Trustful this year, but that ain't going to happen because they need him as their left tackle. So it's good for those things, and some coaches will help the kid and move him to his projected position, which is really noble and honorable, and will get you some brownie points or little Debbie cake points with Nick Saban. But at the end of the day, they got to win. They got to uphold. So I think you'll see maybe a little bit more, but not anything where he's permanently there playing inside like I think one day he might. But that's a good question as well. Carl Lenzner coming back with some more questions here. Good afternoon, John. 2 months from today, obviously Carl's asked over multiple days if you can't tell. 2 months from today, A&M comes to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama. The Tide will be looking for their 6th straight win against the Aggies. Since you are the president of the Jalen Hurts Club, will you please go back and look at the last 10 quarters? 4 against Auburn, 4 against Clemson, and 2 against Georgia. And then explain how Alabama can beat the best teams with that level of quarterback play. In my opinion, if Nick had left him in the game against Georgia, Georgia would be national champs, not Alabama. I'm not trying to be mean, but he was not good enough in those 10 quarters. That is the nicest way I can say it for answering my questions. I'm going to have to pull out the calculator, Carl, because Jalen started 28 games, right? And he won 26 of them. So 28 times 4, 112. So Jalen has played 112 quarters, give or take, at Alabama. And you're saying the last 10 are bad. So times 0.10. So 11% of his snaps and quarters form are technically bad by your standards, which I agree with. I'm not this, first of all, I don't think I'm the president of the Jalen Hurts fan club, but I am the president of the let's try to be objective, even though most people in this beat are ridiculous Crimson Tide homers and go for the flashiest lights out there club. However, I digress. So 11.2% of the quarters that Jalen has played have not been very good. Against Auburn, there's no doubt he was inefficient. Against Clemson, there's no doubt. Against the most NFL guys Bama will face in these next couple of years, he was inefficient. And obviously against Georgia, not so effective. So 11% of those plays not good. But the opposite of that, and this is really where it kind of bugs me. The opposite of that is looking at Tua. Okay? Obviously, less quarters, right? Less significant quarters. So really, let's say he played 10 quarters, and 2 of them were obviously against Georgia. So that's 20% of the quarter. So in that game, half of the game was 20% of the entire sample size we have of Tua Tagovailoa, as opposed to 2 or 3% of Jalen's sample size. So keep that in mind as we go through this. I think there's a perception that Tua was flawless in this national championship game, in this comeback attempt. He wasn't. And I think the good outweighs the bad, and the nice overshadows the not so nice, and the highlights overshadow the lowlights. 100% true, 100% rightfully so. But how big of a fan do you have to be to forget about the lowlights? Whether it was one of the worst interceptions we've ever seen in the history of football, whether it was, frankly, getting lucky, throwing to Najee Harris and Calvin Ridley intercepts the ball for all intensive purposes to tie the game. That was. So that could have been 2 interceptions. Let's not forget Tua taking the sack on 1st and 10 before you ever got to 2nd and 26. And some of those decisions were wild, were inconsistent, were a little radical, and even proved successful to some degree had some radical elements to it. That scramble, that is kind of the first highlight he made on that 3rd down of the game. Again, he backtracked, he gave up ground, some of the principles you're just told not to do at quarterback. So he wiggles out of it and everyone praises him, but when he doesn't, it's a 15-yard loss. And it's like, what the heck is this freshman doing? So while I see your point in the last 10 quarters with Jalen, which is again only 11% of his sample size, let's not act like the last 2 quarters by Tua were flawless, even though that was a much larger sample size, almost double the sample size that we're talking about with Jalen. So my point is this. Nothing is a done deal. It's not 100% concluded. And you talk about beating good teams with Jalen Hurts. We just talked about it with producer Kev. Jalen Hurts threw the game-winning touchdown to Devontae Smith against Mississippi State. You don't beat LSU the last 2 years without Jalen Hurts. Let's remember Clemson, a national championship loss. Bama puts up 31 points. Jalen Hurts is orchestrating the back end of that in crunch time in the 4th quarter, basically by himself, whether it's doing it with his arm or with his legs or both. So let's not act like Jalen has kind of coasted on by this whole time. Again, not the president of the fan club. I'm not the president of the Tua fan club. And I acknowledge Tua is the favorite. You can literally bet on Tua winning the job with better. It's the favorite. It is the Vegas odds-on favorite. And what a great country we live in, by the way, where we can bet on something like that. That's amazing. However, it's not done, and let's not forget, 26-2 is the record for Jalen Hurts, including a championship now, including SEC championships, including playoff wins after playoff wins. I mean, it just, Bama fans, just like we talked about earlier, how quickly the nation was cheering on Alabama and then turned on Alabama. The same thing happened with Jalen Hurts, who's a few months older than Tua. So let's not act like he's this 25-year-old, 6-year redshirt guy or something either. So there's some things that kind of bug me about this whole battle. And one of them is I'm a loyal dude. I'm a pretty loyal guy. So just kind of abandoning, 26-2 like it never happened bothers me to some degree. And like Bama fans continuously do it. How in the world can Jalen do anything in this world, right? And it's like, yeah, he won a ton of big games. He won you SEC championships, playoff games, like literally all you could ask for from a quarterback. Now, was it? No. Is his arm as good as Tua's? No. But over the longer stretch of time, he's protected the football and really been the polar opposite to what we think Tua is. And when you think of Bama and Nick Saban, some of that stuff starts to make sense along the way. I don't have a whole podcast to do it, and we've done it a ton already. I kind of wanted to get through a whole podcast without talking about these two guys, but we have to answer our questions. So, Carl, thank you for asking, but let's not act like Jalen forgot how to, take a step, hold football, and throw a football, because that didn't happen. Rafael Monroy, the final Twitter question of the day. Hope all is well. Who do you see as the two safeties opening day, and who is first off the bench at safety? I'll go with Deontay Thompson. We saw him flash a lot last year, particularly late when Hootie Jones was down. Deontay was great against Clemson and Georgia, multiple pass breakups, sack. I believe he had an interception earlier in the season. He's been in the program a couple of years now, through his own adversity, with some off-field allegations that he's overcome. I like that about him. He's got a lot of things in his corner. I think he's one of the safeties for sure. Next to him, I think, is the real battle. You have a young guy come in, maybe a Josh Jobe, or a second-year guy, Xavier McKinney, Daniel Wright, not the O-lineman recruit, but Daniel Wright, the safety formerly committed to Florida State. I think he's going to factor in as well. And whoever loses that battle is probably off of the bench, to complete your question, Raphael. Although I think some elder statesmen are going to have a say in this thing before it's all said and done. Because if you have Daniel Wright as your next safety, what about the nickel position? Is that just Shaheem Carter, Jared Maiden? What about some of these other guys? There's going to be some shuffle there. But I think in some capacity, Xavier McKinney, Daniel Wright will each play a ton this year. But I think Deontay Thompson is the safest bet, taking it back to Vegas, with the safety position, at least at this point. So really good questions today on Twitter. I think we have one more via Instagram, so let me scroll the old phone here and try to find it. It comes from El Oso Negro, our friend Smitty, on Instagram. John, can you share with us how many players off that 2010 UF recruiting class went pro? They graded well coming out of high school. I'm just curious about their development. Under Saban, has Bama ever had a class put more players in the NFL in comparison to that 2010 UF recruiting class? So we hit the calculator before. Now we're going to hit the old web for another look at that 2010 class at UF. Off the top of my head, I know some of those 5-stars in that group did, in fact, make it to the pros. I believe easily guys like that. Definitely made it to the pros and are still in the NFL. But I think what gets interesting with that stuff is looking at the rankings versus like where they got drafted and or how highly regarded they are in the NFL overall. Because Dominic Easley was a first-round pick of the Patriots, but really hadn't done much since then. Ronald Powell, another guy who I believe had a cup of coffee in the NFL. Don't know if he's still in the NFL. Sharif Floyd, early pick of the Vikings. Has he panned out? I'm not sure. This was a great D-line class by Florida, by the way. Matt Elam, 5-star guy. Great in college. I believe he's out of the NFL already, even though he's fairly young. Josh Shaw was one of the higher-rated guys, a 5-star. He transferred to USC, jumped out the window, hurt his leg, one way or the other. He's in the NFL. He might be having the best NFL career out of all the 5-stars in that class. So defining who made it to the NFL versus who is thriving in the NFL, when you look at that UF class of 2010, which for those who didn't remember, this is the highest ranked class ever on 24/7 Sports in terms of points. This is who Bama is chasing and has a chance to beat in this 2019 cycle. And I think at this point I would project that they would end up winning that race. But a lot of these guys didn't ever make it to the NFL. And then there's some sleepers who had a great career and are still kind of thriving a little bit. How about Trey Burton, 3-star running back out of Venice, who was a quarterback at Florida. Then he moved to tight end, I believe, after the Urban Meyer departure. And now he's in the NFL as a tight end, just won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. I believe he's on another team now. But you just see some kind of random names you forgot about on this list. Nothing that Alabama hasn't done, to answer your question, Smitty. So, you look at really any of these great Alabama classes, 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and you've got 7, 8, 10 NFL guys on those teams. So without even looking it up, I would say, yeah, Bama has had more players than that Nick Saban or than that Urban Meyer recruiting class of 2010, University of Florida. So if that is some kind of omen, maybe you don't want to break the record because maybe that'll mean that your class doesn't ever, one, that UF class never won a national championship, and two, obviously some mixed NFL success with those guys. But either way, that was the best class ever on paper. We'll see if Bama can catch it. We appreciate your questions. Appreciate producer Kev for another show in the books. Of course, another thank you to Pierce Quick for joining us on this edition of the podcast. We'll talk much more about this Champions Cookout 2.0 on Thursday's show, maybe having another guest to help us out there. And we'll lead into the end of the dead period and perhaps the return of recruiting momentum for your Alabama Crimson Tide. Thanks for listening, everybody. Pierce, thanks to Kev, thanks to you. God bless. Garcia out.